Ahoy, this is David Perry with the continuing series of my Zoom TV interviews, as I call them, speaking with friends and colleagues around the world about how we get from what I call the great pause of COVID into the great return. And there is certainly no industry that has been more impacted and more visibly impacted, because we usually see it in stadiums and on our TVs and hear it on our radios and online, than sports. So I'm very pleased to have with us in the Zoom room the voice of the Utah Jazz, noted broadcaster for many years, Craig Bolerjack. Craig, welcome.
Hey, David, thank you, and Ahoy. It's great to be with you.
Thanks. So where are we speaking to you from today?
I'm actually in my office in Salt Lake City, Utah, and awaiting Game 2 of the postseason playoffs between the Utah Jazz and the Denver Nuggets. We'll play tomorrow afternoon at 2 Mountain Time, 4 o'clock down in Orlando. But strangely enough, I'm here and they're there.
Well, you give me my segue, as any good broadcaster with your experience would. Let's jump right into it. I heard the story of where you were when COVID became very real for you and your industry from your brother, Steve Bolerjack, who's a friend and colleague here in Palm Springs. But I want to hear in your own words what it was like the day that COVID became real on the court.
Well, I'll always remember it, David, March 11th. And I'll take you back to the hotel just before the team left. We have 2 buses. The young guys usually take the first bus and get to the arena to work out a little bit more than the veterans. But Quinn Snyder, the head coach, pulled our broadcast team aside and said, look, I just want you to know that Rudy is being tested for COVID-19. And it's like, oh boy, this could change our team. This could change basketball. But at the time, David, I got to be honest, I didn't realize what the impact would be in the next few hours. And so I got on the bus. Quinn Snyder, who's the head coach of the Jazz, we continued just our normal interplay. In fact, that night was the first night that the league had mandated that we keep 6 feet away in our interviews. So Quinn's over here, I'm over here, and we do our coach's interview that runs in the pregame show. And then we go through the regular motions of pregame. We get into the start of the game. I remember we're 10 seconds from tipping off. Both Steven Adams and Tony Bradley, who was taking Rudy's spot that night, a young kid out of North Carolina, step on the court. Everybody, the crowd buzzing. OKC and Utah have a great rivalry. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my left eye, I'm sitting courtside, and a guy runs onto the floor. They bring in both coaches and the officials. They have about a 2 or 3 minute little discussion, and then you start to understand what's going on. The league makes an announcement through the PA announcer that this game has been postponed until further notice.
And the stadium was full.
Full, probably 19, 20,000 fans. And I knew at that time it clicked. Rudy's positive, and we went to commercial break. I came back, I read what the PA announcer again had said, and then I saw the players are motioned by Quinn Snyder and Billy Donovan, the head coach of Oklahoma City, that they're gone. So they both split this way, and the players leave the floor. I'm going, wow, we are not playing tonight. And as soon as I signed off and said, look, if we do get notice that this game will, after further review by the league, if we do play, we'll be back here on AT&T SportsNet. As soon as I said that, I get my phone pops with a text, get to the locker room now. And so I'm thinking this is now really getting serious. And I usually always take my bag and I got my game notes and all this stuff. But for now, I thought, okay, I'm going to go check in. I'll come back and grab all my stuff. Well, little did I know that they let all of us into a separate room and close the door. And we are now in quarantine. And the players are next door to us in the locker room in quarantine. 3 hours go by. Luckily, we had a television, David, in the room that allowed us to see what was happening in the world. But we knew we were the major story that the NBA had shut down. And Rudy Gobert was indeed positive, the first NBA player to be positive for COVID-19. So 3 hours later, Coach Quinn Snyder comes in. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this into it's such an interesting night, but, trying to put it into a couple of 3 minutes here.
No, it's
win.
fine.
I
It's
had to
great
give him
stuff.
I give him a lot of credit, David. He came in with just calm and cool and said, guys, we're in this together. And I'll keep in the loop about what's going to happen. Some food's going to come in. It's about 9 o'clock. And sure enough, I don't know where they got it, probably from the arena, but they catered in some pasta, some salad, and some drinks. So about midnight, we were still kind of wondering, what in the world are we going to do? Are we here? Are we going to be in this room for the next 2 weeks? What, because your mind is just running everywhere.
Yeah.
And he comes back in around 12:30 and says, we're going to get tested. About 1 o'clock, the players were done. They bring us in. And David, I got to be honest, it looked like a movie from Spielberg. Everyone out in the hallway from the Oklahoma City Health Department dressed in hazmat garb. And they take us in. We go nose swab, throat swab, and it was not fun. I think they left, their signature up in here somewhere. And after that, then they shuttle us onto our team buses around 2 in the morning, and they drive us outside to a hotel we'd never been at, and we're told to get off, take a room key, any key on the table. There was no one there, and I go take a room key, and they said, we'll alert you in the morning about your test, negative or positive. So at 4 in the morning, I'm wide awake. I'm just laying there thinking, well, tomorrow will bring a new day, obviously, but I'm going to find out if I'm positive or negative. And at 8:45 in the morning, I remember it. I looked at my watch going, okay, here it is. My life could change. And I just got a quick phone call from our public relations PR staff, said, Craig Bowler, you're negative. And I just sat there like, oh my gosh. Unbelievable news. And then I make phone calls to my wife and some friends.
Not to interrupt, but had you spoken to your wife before this? I mean, she must have been in a white swivet.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, they did not want us to be on really social media until we had, and I once in a while I tweet out something about the game, but no, it was just kind of like stay put, stay quiet until we know what's going on. But we talked to family and a few close friends. And so, yes, she was in the loop the entire time. And I just told her, look, I'll call you every couple of hours and update you what's going on. And of course, my sons were concerned as well. And I tried to contact them in a loop and told them I'd let them know. And then in the morning, I told everybody, look, good news, I'm good. And then, David, long story short, they then take us outside and meet with the Oklahoma City Public or Health Department in a conference room, and then that's where we found out that Donovan Mitchell had tested positive, asymptomatic, by the way, had shown no signs, no fever, and Rudy, though, did. Rudy had all the symptoms and taste and smell and those type of things. So after that, Delta sent a flight in for us, and some people were very kind, pilots that fly us quite a bit, who came to our rescue, basically, and volunteered to fly us, and 4 flight attendants that fly us on a regular basis. I gave them a lot of credit for being gutty because, again, nobody knew what was going to really come down after this. We get back to Salt Lake, again, meet with Utah health officials. They give us a long breakdown of what to do, and I went into quarantine here at my home for 7 days. It wasn't 14 because I was not in the close perimeter of Rudy and Donovan. Even though I'm around them, I wasn't in close proximity on a continual basis. And so my quarantine was 7. Coaches and other players were 14. And strangely enough, those are the only 2 players, no coaches, no training staff were positive ever during that time of quarantine. And I find that fascinating because they were in that 6-foot range that everybody speaks of.
So that's one of the more dramatic stories I've ever heard during COVID.
Yes.
I remember when it was related to me secondhand, and I was like, wow, I got to talk to this guy. I'm on the board of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. We work with the Hotel Council. Our firm does a lot of work with large-scale events. I always say when there's something that's going to bring 1 million people to San Francisco and they need someone to tell people your parking is going to be hellish for the next 3 weeks, I'm the guy they put in front of the crowd.
You're the go-to guy.
Yeah. So, of course, this year was going to be a big year in San Francisco. PGA
Yes.
coming to San Francisco. And I don't have to tell you, being in basketball, the Warriors are kind of the big deal in San Francisco. San Francisco went from being kind of the sports capital of 2020 to an empty field. You know, we had PGA, but with no people taking part as attendees or watchers. But now officially, we've got sports back.
Mm-hmm.
Go from what it was like that day when it all stopped to what is it like now? I mean, you are still broadcasting, but it's not what it looked like 4 months ago.
No. You know, David, this has been the most surreal. Again, I keep going back to, I feel like I'm in a movie. I'm just waiting for Spielberg or somebody to come out and say, okay, that's a take, that's a wrap, and we're done. But that's not going to happen. You know, I give a lot of credit to the NBA and the commissioner, Adam Silver, who came up with this incredible idea of putting these players in a bubble. That's been overused. I know it's not a true bubble, but they've got them at the Orlando Disney World Resort, 3 hotels, 22 teams. That was the plan. And they came in first week of July. Here we are almost into September, and the players are still there. Some have departed since being eliminated from the postseason because the playoffs did begin yesterday on Monday of August. And the plan was never to have a broadcaster in the bubble, except later when the national TNT and ABC and ESPN crews would come in, and they have slowly filtered in and gone through their own protocol to get through a quarantine. So for us as local broadcasters, and we have a region of about 6 states that we cover with the Utah Jazz, and you know, Denver has their own region, Colorado, a little bit of Wyoming, and Kansas, and so you know, we're all in the Rocky Mountain area, and a lot of fans, you know, depend on basketball this time. Well, they did want the playoffs in April, May, and June, and here we are playing in August, which has never happened. But the league stayed with it. They mapped out the plan. The bubble so far has been secure, and we did 3 scrimmages, and along with 8, as they called, reseeding games, which were regular season games that counted towards the playoffs and where you would be in standings 1 through 8. The Jazz finished 6th. Nuggets were number 3, so that's how they pair up. But I'm broadcasting in Salt Lake City from Vivint Arena, a 19,000-seat arena, beautiful place, fun to be in there with the crowd and the energy, David. There's no one there. There's 8 of us, and it's myself and Thurl Bailey, who's a former Jazz player, 20 feet away. Our radio broadcasters are on the opposite side of the arena. Kristen Kinney, our sideline reporter, is on the very far end, and our pregame guys, hosts, are up on the 5th floor. Well, I'm on the 3rd. And you look down and you just hear a building almost asking, please bring them back. It's an eerie, David, I got to be honest, it's eerie walking into an arena that is always alive with energy. So now my task is to broadcast off the Jumbotron. It's a big board, so I've got a pretty good view, but there's nobody there. And the team is 2,200 miles away, playing with no crowd and a virtual screen that shows some fans that log in on their computers. And so there's that kind of a sense of like, yeah, you know, whatever. But there's no sound, there's no energy. And that's what I miss the most, is that you feed off the people. You feed off the energy. And I know the players do as well, especially in a tight game in the 4th quarter. And right now, there's no home court advantage. These guys are just playing basketball, and I think trying to dig deep themselves to find that extra something to push them ahead in this playoff series. So it's an odd time, David. Man, I tell you, I'm hoping, wishing, praying that we get back to some sense of normalcy soon. And I think fans are too. They're hungry. They, you know, as you know, in this country, sports is such a big vibe of what we do, and it's an escape. And I think we really need this escape more than ever. And I'm just glad we got a chance to bring basketball back in some way. It's not perfect, but at least we're playing basketball.
Right. Gathering that maybe that story you told at the top of the broadcast of that being your worst day, unless there's another worst day, what was the worst day of this period and what was the best day? I.e., did something come out of COVID specific to the NBA and your work with the players that made you think, gosh, that's something I learned about Craig Bolerjack that I wouldn't have without this horrible COVID summer?
Wow, David, that's a great question. I think the night in the quarantine, I watched all of us with great, we were kind of in a shock, but you also can look around the room to your coworkers and understand each individual better. And I got to know them about as deep as I ever could. I think I was more in tune with another human than I ever have been, because one was very upset and tears. One was very quiet. One was very aggressive and motivated to find out as much as he could on his laptop computer. I was more concerned about talking to the kids and my wife. Others didn't want to be bothered. Others laid on the floor and were probably in deep thought about what actually was going on. I think I found the human condition that night for the very first time in my life, what it really means to be in a situation of unknown. I've never been put in that situation. I can't imagine what a warlike situation would be, or some sort of a, weather-related or earthquake, sheltered down with someone. It happens every day, but never to me, right? And so this was probably the closest I would get to that, being alone and not knowing what was about to happen. That was the strangest thing. I stayed calm. Good old dad, my dad, 87 and going strong, and my mom too. I mean, my dad's from the military, and so he's always said, hey, you know what, just think for the moment. And so I was just trying to focus on that. And, but I sure the heck wanted out. I sure did. I said, man, there was no way I'm staying in this room, for a quarantine. But there was a fear, maybe that's where they would keep us. And that's part of that unknown, as I watched everybody around the room trying to deal with their own emotions. It was really, for me, a very enlightening 7 hours. It really was.
Hearing you talk about the potency and the power and the emotion of sports in general, but basketball in specific, makes me think that you are generally an optimistic person. And you seem pleased that the NBA has managed to keeping on.
Right.
Do you see optimism coming out of this? Do you see us getting back to a quote unquote normal or a new normal? How will COVID, even if tomorrow is a miracle drug, boom, we all got it. We're safe, we're cured, everything's fine. I don't think that's going to happen, and I'm a pragmatic optimist too. But even if that happens, how will COVID have changed the NBA?
Boy, again, a great question. I think we're all going to find this out together. But I think what it also has done is, for me, to see the players, let's be honest here, there's a lot of money involved with salaries and also television contracts, billions of dollars that are involved. They gave players the opportunity to opt out. And I talked to many of them while they've been in quarantine via Zoom, just like you and I are talking right now. Those questions have been posed, David, about why did you decide to jump in and basically leave the family? Look, they're all pretty well off. There's a few on that bench, maybe 9, 10, and 11, or 10, 11, and 12, that are making good money, but not the astronomical amounts that we know in professional sports. Most of these guys are well-to-do for the rest of their lives and beyond. But I think what I've really realized, there is a love for this game.
Mm-hmm.
They do it because they love to play. And granted, they're a rare breed where they have a skill that they're highly paid for, and they entertain us. And my part of it is to try to bring that game to life even more for the fans, and make it, an escape route, I think, through life's troubles. Now we're at a point in time where this just hasn't gone away, I think, like we all thought it would. And now we understand this is a long-term scenario. Football is in a bad way collegiately. NFL is going to try. Major League Baseball stumbled a bit. Hockey's done a pretty good job. But the thing that you can play, but I know what every player misses is the fan. I miss them. I want them there because they make the sport. They really do. The players are there on stage. But if you can't do your thing in front of, 20,000 per night, it just doesn't have the same impact. I think it's helping people, David, honestly, at home to get away for a couple of hours. But I know they wish they could be there. And there will probably be a plan, and I've heard through the grapevine that there'll be a plan sooner, probably when the 2021 season begins, if and when they try to re-implement fans. I mean, reintroduce them 3,000 or 4,000 at a time and see how it goes. And then, just keep building the numbers back up. That could take time. It could be a year or more. And to even say that, I got to be honest, that scares me because I want to travel. I love San Francisco. I love the new Warriors Arena. I like the interaction of all those fans and hearing the boos and the hisses and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. I mean, what a great run with Durant. Now he's off to the Nets. But a great run of basketball championships and the way that they play. I miss that. I think fans miss it. But hopefully sooner than later, we will reintroduce the world back to watching sports in person. And I think that will be maybe the time we all say together, we have recovered. And that's what I hope happens soon.
Well, I know I speak for myself and Warriors fans and everyone in San Francisco would love to see you up there on what is now the biggest board in the NBA at the arena. In closing, any thoughts that you would like to leave? And I think this question, I want you to speak to the players. What do you want to say to the Jazz in specific and the other players whose careers and games you've covered for a long time? What would you like to leave them with?
Well, I always say to the guys I know, and I've made, I walk a thin line. My education is broadcast journalism. I did nightly news. I know that there is a fine line you walk, David, that you can be friendly but not friends, because the story always has to be told with truth. And that's what my background is from. I'm old school compared to what we deal with in the media today, which is more entertainment than maybe a little bit more hardcore into the fact. I've had run-ins with guys because you have to ask the tough question. Karl Malone, who's a Hall of Famer and played for the Utah Jazz until he went to LA for a quick year to try to win a championship. We still stay in touch because of just, I think, mutual respect, because we came to Salt Lake in the same summer of 1985. So I've built relationships with different players. Some I don't know, and they prefer it that way. But I think I've always tried to build respect back and forth. I think that's important to do, to make sure you get the right story and that they understand my job is to do that. And they don't want to play me for something that would, benefit them. So we try to keep it on an even keel. Saying that, I have great respect for what they do and their talent. And, for the Jazz, especially in the bubble, I do salute you for the mental test that you now are going through. I try to put myself, David, in that same situation. If I was away from my family, quarantine, but yes, it's in Orlando. It's in a resort setting. And to the men and women who served our country, I try to make a balance here, because in wartime, I can't think of anything worse, being deployed or being a prisoner of war, because that's the true quarantine of being away. but this is another time in a different place. But still, it's a challenge. And I think, David, honestly, the last two teams standing in the bubble in October, when the title will be decided, those two teams I really will applaud, because what they've done, not only physically, but I think the mental test that has been given to all these players, those true two champions will be not only the best teams, but also proven together as one. They work together to help themselves get through a really tumultuous time and a challenge, the mental challenge. And I think that's what I appreciate the most, is not only, I mean, their physical abilities, but I think really the fact that they were there for nearly 4 months and somehow survived it and didn't want to jump the fence. Because I'm sure there's times they think, I'm done, I'm one out of here, and get back to my family and having a little bit of normalcy. But I will say that that's what impresses me the most. Whoever stands last, the last two teams, I'll applaud them, because I think mentally it may be the biggest test they've ever been through and will ever go through.
Yeah. Well, I think that Steph and all the other Warriors will understand when I say this, that everyone who's playing this year is part of a championship season. The COVID season we'll never forget. Thank you. We've been speaking with Craig Bolerjack, veteran broadcaster and the voice of the Utah Jazz. Thanks for speaking with us, Craig, and best to your wife and your 3 boys. Look forward to actually shaking your hand, hopefully soon.
As well, David. Thank you.
Ahoy.